Right, good evening. Thank you all for coming out and welcome to the Inside Out lecture series here at Leeds Beckett University. I'm Simon Morris, I'm Director of Research here. We are delighted to have with us tonight as our honoured guest speaker the fashion designer Phoebe English. It's also worth mentioning, because this is quite unusual, that we have two illustrious ex-students, alumni of Leeds Polytechnic from the 70s, the artists Simon English and Wendy Freeman, who are, collectively, Phoebe's parents. So to introduce Phoebe properly, we have Jenny Prendergast, Senior Lecturer in Fashion Design.
Good evening and thank you all for coming to this event. Phoebe is one of the most exciting designers in fashion today. Her construction skills and the techniques that she uses echo a historical context, which is very rare. However, it is a learning ethos within Leeds Beckett University. Her work is stocked in international companies, and it has been seen in magazines such as Dazed and Confused, ID, the New York Times, and we are really delighted to introduce Phoebe English.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. Thank you very much for all coming this evening and for having me over. Yeah, lots of fond memories of coming to Leeds as a child. 'Cause my parents met here, so I wouldn't be here without this uni, so thank you for having me. I'm a fashion designer. I studied at St Martin's. I started on fashion with marketing, and I hated it, and I swapped over to fashion in knit, fashion with knit, which was a much better fit for me. And then kind of from there, I kind of really found my feet and really started to enjoy studying, and graduated from the BA and then went straight on to the MA. So I was at St Martin's for a very long time. I'm going to show you through some of my collections, and I guess they kind of make like quite a natural timeline. So when I was putting it together, I thought it'd be quite a good opportunity just to explain how my work where it started from and how it's developed along the way and kind of where it is now. So I guess it's kind of like a developmental journey across everything that I've done. I've been going for about 5 or 6 years now, and sell mainly in kind of concept stores rather than kind of big department stores, and the way that I practice fashion is really a kind of celebration and respect for kind of a slow fashion rather than a fast mass production type of fashion. So yeah, that's what I stand for, and kind of how the collections are based and structured. I started off with knitwear and textiles. I now do a lot of cut and sew, so that's just using fabric and pattern cutting, and I also have now moved on to also doing menswear as well. So I've kind of developed from that kind of textile background. I suppose a lot of the things I'm going to show you is when I was looking at it, kind of realised that working in fashion has allowed me to explore a lot of other creative mediums, so installations, set design, filmmaking, invitation design, web design. So yeah, that's why I really love what I do, is that it allows me to work within so many different mediums and different collaborators and different creative outlets. It's not just kind of making dresses all day. So I've tried to include quite a few diverse examples of other projects that I've done alongside, that kind of sit alongside the collections that I've done. So I'm going to start off with just some of my textiles that I did on my BA. Hopefully this won't be too much of a kind of trip down memory lane. So yeah, this is a crochet technique called hairpin crochet, which is It's a traditional lace making technique, and this is significant because it was the first time I kind of tried to communicate something through textiles. So it was using this sort of vintage I say with inverted commas, kind of granny, crafty technique, and I was trying to update it by executing it in an elastic. So it's a shearing elastic. It's very time consuming. This is an example of how I make those very labor intensive pieces. So I build them on a stand, and I've always really enjoyed documenting the process of actually making things. I really enjoy seeing how the physical landscape of what you're working on changes as you're developing it and as you're working on it. So I've always been really interested in documenting that, which you'll see as we go through. So this is the hairpin crochet. Traditionally you would just make it into a flat sort of lace material, but obviously I was playing around with it and twisting it and kind of making it into this quite elaborate pattern. This is the actual kind of how you would normally use it. This is in elastic as well. So yeah, really very decorative. The colours are very feminine, and yeah, this was a trial of threading beads into the elastic. So to make these kind of constructed, they look like embroideries, but they're actually a constructed textile. And these are some of the pieces, the final pieces that I did. It's quite a long time ago now. Obviously very decorative, very feminine, kind of traditionally sexy silhouette. Yeah, they were very labour intensive, and I was really into kind of high levels of decoration and surface manipulation, which is something that I've kind of started with, and I've kind of taken it on to other areas now. After that, I got onto the master's degree at St Martin's, which is quite an infamous course. It's quite hardcore and fierce. And my work really started to change a lot whilst I was on that course. This is an example of one of the first samples I did whilst I was studying there. And it's kind of pertinent because it was really a turning point in my aesthetic. I could have sort of really began to distance myself and reject the work that I had previously made that you've just seen, which was very feminine and decorative and quite fashion, stereotypically fashion-y, and work more in a kind of concept led way. So this is knitted string that's kind of being trapped in resin, which is kind of I really liked how it manipulated the way the material hung and how it moved. This is another one here. So sort of mummifying the knitted surface. This is a larger example. So yeah, it was a really kind of a turning point of what I do, and yeah, how to kind of communicate something by manipulating material and a surface rather than just making a decorative surface. There's another early piece I did on that course, which was trying to marry this very, very elaborate organic surface, but using a kind of really thick, heavy rubber. So it was kind of trying to get that kind of contrast between decoration on organic form in this man-made, hard material. And here's some drawings I did of it as well. So yeah, it's just kind of a development of where I was going as a designer. This is another one I did, which was, I think this was going back to using an old technique. So this is a rag making technique, which you would normally find made from like recycled material, kind of very crafty looking. So I was trying to reinterpret that technique by making it in neoprene, which is traditionally a sporty material. So yeah, it was just kind of playing around with the connotations of the surfaces and the possibilities of the materials that you can use to make those. It made this really heavy, kind of thick material. So this is an example of some of the draping I did with it, and the chevron pattern. So that was kind of the first year of that course. So obviously kind of developed quite a lot while I was on that first year. And then in the second year I started to use the kind of slightly weird hair texture. So this is an acrylic hair, and still using the same shearing elastic to crochet with. Still a little bit decorative. So this was kind of my initial sampling for this collection. Kind of going away from the decoration and kind of working with this sort of bunched forms. So this again is like a step-by-step development of how I made the first piece. So this would be what you would call a pre-collection. So it's the collection you do before your actual collection. So it's basically like the warm-up. So as you can see, it's quite elaborate. It was very time-consuming, and once again, I was like building it on the stand, but this time obviously using a slightly more conceptual material. So it's the hair and the rubber. I initially started to use the rubber because you could manipulate it and you could use it like a leather, but it was actually much easier to cut. It was easier to punch. So it was a kind of an easy material, and also holds so many connotations I really liked that you could sort of play around. It was quite a disgusting kind of combination of material, having the hair and the rubber together. So this is more development of that. And then this is kind of the top part of it. So yeah, very elaborate and very decorative. So in the end, you know, I'd done all this work on this piece, and I went into the tutorial, and we actually just completely stripped away all of the work that I'd done on it, and we just ended up using the bottom part of it, the idea on the bottom part, which is just the line of punched holes directly along the bottom. So yeah, completely rejecting all of that kind of elaborate, labour-intensive decoration and just stripping it right back to just this very pure line of holes that were punched through the rubber and with the hair threaded through it. So this is an example of what we took from that one piece I made. So this is the inside. I really like photographing the pieces from the inside because the construction is something that really interests me. So you can see the hair sort of folded in half and then threaded through the punched holes with a crochet hook, and then it's caught on a line of elastic. So that's how the hair stays in place. So from that I made the final collection, which is the collection I graduated with, which is this one here. And yeah, it was just completely pared down compared to what I was working on before, and simplified. This is an example of the first kind of asymmetrical composition that I worked on the stand. And again, this one is an example of how you can spend weeks and weeks and weeks developing something, hours and hours and hours. But this piece was actually done, the actual design of it was done when I put the mannequin in the lift to take it up to a tutorial, and somehow on the way the pins came undone and it kind of fell off. And so sometimes things take sort of 3 seconds, and sometimes they can take 3 hours, and sometimes they can take three weeks. So yeah, this was the first time I was sort of interested by time and how you can convey laboured time, or you can convey instantaneous time. This is again this is basically the inside of this top here, turned inside out. I don't know if the quality is good enough on here for you to see them. This is a different file than I was working before. Again, draping, so playing around with samples. Obviously, when you're developing a textile, you're making swatches, and yeah, it's really great if you can make big swatches, so you can turn them upside down or inside out, or attach them to something else, and you can really get that opportunity to play around with them and develop them and see all the possibilities that they can do. I really enjoyed working with this textile because it had so much dynamic possibility. It moved in a really amazing way. This is all hand-punched, hand-cut strips of rubber, which took sort of weeks to put together with a crochet technique. But it gave this really dynamic, sort of shivery movement in the show. So this is the final collection that I did, and this is the first time I realised I really hated catwalk imagery, yeah, it really made me kind of realise that I wanted to take more control over the imagery that was made of my work, and that maybe catwalk imagery wasn't something that suited the particular surfaces or the particular forms that I was working on. As you can see so much more from an image like this than you can from an image like this. I think catwalking images, sometimes you can lose so much detail. So I think it was just a personal realization that the intricacies of my work was sometimes lost in this very set way of displaying your work. Fashion has got so many kind of, how do you explain, parameters sometimes, which can be a little bit frustrating if you want to work in a slightly different way. So I mean, a lot of the things I'm going to show you are kind of sort of realization points where I realized things that were already set within the parameter of fashion actually didn't work for me, and they didn't work for my particular style or aesthetic of surface. So yeah, sometimes you can learn more by things that you don't like than you can from things that you do. So I graduated with that collection, and I won quite a few prizes, which came as quite a shock, and which was great, but it wasn't really what I was expecting. So I spent the summer kind of hiding away, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I'd been in education for ages. I'd done a BA, I'd done a year in industry, I'd done an MA, and then I was kind of out in the big wide world and didn't really know how to function without education. So I decided just to kind of hide away and start making some work, and I just wanted to kind of hide away and make some work as quietly and as inconspicuously as possible. So this is the first bit of work I did after that collection, and I was offered a show in which I kind of hid from, and they didn't answer their phone calls and didn't really want to do it. And then in the end, a friend convinced me just to say yes. So I agreed to make a few pieces to go in this little fashion show. So this is the smocking collection. So it is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with smocking. It's a textile technique where you gather lots of fabric together, and it's traditionally used on the fronts of little children's dresses, and then you embroider into them. So it makes this kind of really nice, pretty, decorative kind of collar yoke, front yoke. But I decided to do it in calico. So calico is like a toiling fabric. It's really heavy, it smells, it's really cheap. I think that was the main thing, is I had no money and it was a really cheap material. And so I spent like 50 quid on like 2 massive rolls. And you basically mark a series of dots, and then you join all the dots with one line of string, and then you pull it. I don't know how many non-textile people there are here, so I'm just going to try and explain them as I go. So yeah, and I did it quite wide, so it made a really kind of heavy, chunky surface. So these pieces were really heavy, and again, I'd got a little studio by then, and I was really interested in how the landscape of the studio changed as I worked on different pieces. So this image and this image was just a kind of a documentation of how those tabletops change every day, which is probably a bit of an over-romantic view of my studio table, but it's quite nice to be interested other than just dresses. But you can see along the bottom like that how thick the wedge is. So I mean, it's not really like a jersey top that you buy in H&M. I don't think I really thought too much about the context that I was making the work in. I was just kind of reacting to something. This particular textile was a reaction against the frenetic and the dynamic surfaces in the previous collection, so it was like a direct kind of movement away from the work I'd done before, basically. So this is an example of draping, and you can kind of see how unflexible it is. It's a very, very rigid, hard surface. So completely different from the hair. The hair went everywhere. It just blew in the wind. It got tangled up. So it was a kind of a direct reaction against that type of textile I was doing, a few months before. I also left the strings in that you gathered the smocking with, and was kind of wanted to make a comment on the actual making process, the actual process of making the textile. So it was kind of a reminder that you could still see the method it was made with, and I actually left those on. So they kind of had a bit of a hairy quality to them. But the way these moves are, they're very, very heavy and solid. I distressed quite a lot of them. So this is an image of me colour stripping the calico. So you can see I've bleached out the bottom half of it, and then we kind of attacked it with shredders to make it really fluffy. We dyed it, we painted it, we stained it, we colour stripped it. We tried to just abuse it as much as possible just to see kind of what would happen with it. So this is the staining and dyeing. This is an example of one of the necklines. So you can see how kind of stiff it is. It's almost like a corset. This is the collection together. You can see some of the shredded parts of the really fluffy white bits. And then this is kind of an example of the first opportunity I had to kind of control the imagery I was making. The catwalk imagery from the show that this collection in was so horrible and so awful. The lighting was bad and the models were bad, and I just wanted to kind of control the work and put them into images where you could actually see them and appreciate them. And there was also a bit of rubber in this collection as well. It was quite a nice contrast to the calico. There's kind of the rawness of the calico. This is the collection I did after that, which is the first time I used pink, which is, never underestimate the power of pink as a colour. It's very powerful, and it caused a big stir just using that colour. I think this collection was a weird time for me. I had won this 3 fashion show sponsorship, and the collection I've just shown you was the first one, and this was the second one, and they were really pushing for me to do a big collection. They wanted me to do 17 looks, and kind of using their adultness over me to kind of tell me what I needed to do. So I did, but in retrospect, it wasn't like a framework that worked for my work at all. It was like trying to make me do too much, when actually textiles take a really long time to make, and it didn't necessarily suit my manner of working. So I learnt from that one. This is a close-up of the latex. So the pink is all latex, latex and boiled felt. So once again, that kind of the communication of materials is something I'm always returning to in the collection. I really like it when you don't necessarily understand why something is good or why it looks good, but sometimes it's good because it's communicating something and something's reacting against something else, but sometimes you don't even pick that up. It's just something that you can naturally, subconsciously kind of pick up when you see something. So the wool and the latex together was an example of that. I think at this point I was kind of quite clear that I wanted to work within the realms of craft, but I wanted to reject the craftiness of craft, so to make craft that was crafted rather than crafty. So when I research, I go to second-hand books, shops, I trawl through libraries. I go into shops which are full of kind of granny knitting books, and kind of scroll through all those pages looking for techniques that would be kind of deemed crafty or unfashionable or kind of too granny, and then kind of take that challenge and reinterpret them by changing their scale, changing the material they're executed in, just to try and kind of bring them up to date and make them relevant, and kind of to dispel that kind of myth of craftiness. So yeah, latex, good material to kind of update any granny technique in. So this is a granny, granny-ish technique, which is basket weaving. So lots of research on basket weaving, and then I cut loads of the rubber. I went back to rubber as a material, cut it up into long strips, and then just wove a big basket, swatched together, and then draped it on the stand to make this kind of really hard basket skirt. I'm going to show you a little film now, which again is another example of trying to. By then I was doing these shows, but not very many people were coming to them. So doing the films was a way of making my work travel a bit more. Fashion week's a really tight schedule, and it's very hard for editors to get to shows that aren't on the official schedule. So the films were really about me kind of exploring something creatively, but it was also a tactic to kind of allow my vision and what I was exploring in the clothes to travel a bit further than the kind of 20 people that came to my show. So I'll just play this for you. It's only a few minutes long. This was just shot in the night time in a swimming pool. Oh, the sound isn't working. Do you know how to get the sound to work? Sorry. Sorry. Oh, is it this one? Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, is that okay? Okay, you're all sitting comfortably. Sorry. So yeah, that was one of the kind of the first films that we did. It was actually the third one, but by then we had got quite a big crew of friends to come and help. So it was a slightly more high level of production than the first two. So I thought I'd show you that one. So after then, we'd got quite a few shops. So there was pressure on the collections to kind of start being a bit more commercial. People really didn't get on very well with the smocking collection in the shops. They got really tangled up in the strings, really stressed out, and yeah, I was having to kind of make an active decision about trying to control my unbridled use of creativity, and maybe make things a bit more commercial. So this is kind of a good example of when I started to do more cut and sew pieces. So these are interlocking clothes. So and it was also one of my most minimal collections that I've done. So you can see these ones on the left are actually a t-shirt which is sliced into a dress, and then they're sort of fastened with this jewelry, these jewelry clasps. So you can see, like in a catwalk image, quite hard to read that level of intricacy, but when you see it on a hanger, it's like, oh, how do you even get this on? So yeah, that's something I've always really struggled with, is the way that we actually experience fashion. A lot of people only experience it through little JPEG images on a laptop, or even just on a phone, just like this is kind of what I would call a catwalk image, which you can't see the back, you can't see how it moves. It's kind of quite frustrating from a designer's perspective that it gives you such a two-dimensional representation of work that you've spent months working on, and it can be really frustrating. So kind of hence the photography and hence the fashion videos where you can really see the textile surfaces very close up. So I worked with a jewellery designer to make these mouthpieces that you had to hold in your mouth, made out of brass, and the textile is all made out of glass. So it was kind of a bit aggressive and a bit fragile, and I don't know what was happening at this time. But yeah, once again, this was my third sponsored show, and once again, they were really pushing for a big collection. And yeah, so this was, by then I was in quite a few shops and kind of trying to learn how to run a fashion business, which is just not something I learned anything about when I was studying. So I was kind of trying to learn as I went along. One of the shops that we sell in is a very famous concept store called Dover Street Market. I'm not sure if any of you kind of been down there to visit it, or. Yes, good. So good. Yes, it's very concept driven. It's very cool. So they were our first stockists, so the first people that invested in me and brought my work and sold the smocked pieces. And in order to promote, because we were so small and we didn't have very much press outreach, they asked us to do a window display. So this is the window display that I made, which is a 3-meter wide glass globe. So it's like a really big textile sculpture that we made to hang in the window. But yeah, weeks of kind of hand sewing these glass pieces together, these glass beads, and that's what it looked like in the space. So I suppose it was a statement that against kind of a traditional fashion window display where you have mannequins wearing frocks, and yeah, it was really like a statement to say, you know, I just wanted to use one element of the collection and display it in a completely different way. So it was kind of my first statement, really, that I made outside of the shows to the world. But it was well received. I then made a few other pieces from the glass textile. So this is a piece I made for an exhibition. So it's kind of technically impossible to actually wear this piece because it's completely made out of glass. But we also made it into a 7-meter high installation in a gallery as well. So it's done the rounds, this particular textile sample. Which this was huge and took sort of many weeks to make. These are an example of the displays that I did in that exhibition, which was kind of a collection of all the ephemera of making a collection. So you can see my sketchbooks here, even just like the labels that we use in our clothes. It was about kind of displaying parts and elements of the collection that you don't normally experience. You just kind of usually in fashion you just see these nice glossy perfect images. So it was really about kind of showing the behind the scenes. You can see here like the tools that I used to make those textiles with, like the scribbles on the drawings, like working drawings, working photos. This collection was again quite a commercial collection. Everything was entirely transparent, and the whole collection was made out of dress net, which is that tutu fabric that you use to make ballerinas tutus. It's really hard and really stiff, and it's really cheap, and it also comes in a really good array of colours. So I think with that material I was trying to make manipulate the fabric like I would manipulate a textile, but so it could go into a cut and sew garment. So some of these garments, so like for example the blue one is like 20 layers of dress net, which is hard to see in a catwalk image. But it made the clothes have this really nice sculptural element, so they really held their shape like a cocoon. And we layered them up into different kind of areas of transparency. So some were really chunky, like really fleshy and chunky, and some of them were very, very sheer. So this is the first set I ever did. So once again, it was a sponsored show, it was a catwalk layout, but I added in this element of a piece of set design. So this is a kind of open, almost a bit like a tent, but it was made to reflect the geometry of the mosaic on the floor. So we had the show kind of within and throughout this piece. But this was a real kind of landmark moment for me, and really made me realise that I wanted to actively move away from catwalks and work more towards a presentation, because it really worked so much better with my work. It was more intimate, it was more meaningful. So yeah, this was an important moment for me. This was just an example of some of the styling I made for the show. So this is again, it's a visor that's made out of lots and lots of layers of net, and then it's put over the face. And it was kind of it was a play on voyeurism, and by then I'd been doing quite a few things in fashion, and I was sort of beginning to question the nature of voyeurism, and how a fashion show is just about voyeurism, and you go there to look at things. So it was just a way to play with that notion, so the girls could see out of these visors, but nobody could see their faces or their eyes behind them. So you could see them, they could see you, but you couldn't see them, if that makes sense. So it was just actually a way of kind of protecting the girls and making them feel a little bit safer, maybe. This is a still from the film I designed for this collection. The film is a play on the idea of transparency, which all the clothes were inspired by. So all of the clothes, instead of the girls wearing the clothes were just sort of hovering in front of them. I'm going to play it for you now so you can see it. It's kind of a bit aggressive, the music, so I'll try and turn the music down a little bit. Or maybe you'll like that, I don't know. This collection was the first presentation I did. We had no money, so we did it in a restaurant. It's one of my favourite collections. It's one of the most commercial collections I did in my early work. I had previously only used natural fibres, so cottons, like pure things like glass, or things with connotations like rubber. So this was the first collection I used man-made fibres in, so it's made out of power mesh, so like a really sporty, I don't like it at all, fabric, and also massive bands of elastic. I think looking back at the materials I have used, so sort of calico, dress net, elastic, they're all materials that are designed to do something, like a working fabric that has been developed to do a particular job or have a particular role, or it's been designed for a specific purpose. So like the dress net is to make volume under dresses, the calico is to toile in, elastic is to give stretch. So it's something I'm always drawn to when I'm choosing fabrics. So again, I was using sheer materials here, but this is a very, very soft dress net, and then the textiles I made in this collection is made from massive long strips. They're probably about this wide of power mesh that's then kind of pulled together into a rope, and then we've knitted these really chunky, soft, squidgy macrame surfaces, and then kind of banded loads of elastic over the top of some of the pieces. I think here I'm just kind of beginning to play a little bit with using colour again. Obviously this isn't particularly colourful, but trying to find a colour palette that sort of had a reaction, so the kind of this weird tights flesh colour with like bright red was a bit clinical and a bit disgusting. So just trying to choose things that have a reaction or can make people feel something. Wasn't sort of traditionally pretty. It was a bit gross, to be honest. This is a kind of weird colour palette, but I mean it's quite striking. This was the set we did, so we basically, I love the idea of having this restaurant and then just dumping a huge pile of burnt matter in it and then sticking these big lights in them. So yeah, it was about interrupting this sort of relaxing restaurant atmosphere. And this is the girls doing their presentation, so they're just sort of hanging around, really having a chat. So as you can see, just the complete reaction against the traditional catwalk layout that you're sort of expected to do. It's also a lot cheaper this way. These are all friends that I had, and yeah, was always, it's always quite a sort of DIY job sometimes doing a show for Fashion Week. This is a close-up of the macrame. This piece is actually was developed from a piece of trench art that I brought, which was boot strings that had been knotted into this really beautiful macrame pattern. And yeah, I did like 25 trials to try and teach myself how to do it. I finally got it. There it is in its power mesh beauty. So yeah, once again, we were asked to do an installation in Dover Street has a New York branch, so they were doing their grand opening. So this was a textile installation I did for that big opening. This is us making it in my boyfriend's studio. It took a very long time. And it's also, I really liked how weird and kind of gross it looks. I obviously sort of always keep navigating back to this spherical form. I think I really like how maternal it is as a structure. And also it was the same shop I did the glass globe for, so it was kind of an interplay and kind of comment on the first one I did for them. This is it in the shop. It's not very good quality, this. This is again doing a photo shoot, trying to get my own imagery of the pieces. This collection we did so we filmed the presentation of it in a studio, and then for Fashion Week we projected the film of the presentation on top of the actual presentation. If that makes sense. So it was like a double layered presentation. I'm actually wearing it here. You can see. Again, sort of playing with this idea of being hidden. Fashion can be it's a very conspicuous profession to work in, and you often come across people that really like their own presence and want to be noticed, and that's why they make their clothes, and they're big and they're brash and they want photos. And but I think, you know, as I kind of was going along and working in it, I realised I wasn't really that person, and so sometimes the styling of the pieces or the manner that they're presented in are a reflection of how I would like to sort of be a bit more reserved and be a bit more hidden. So yeah, sometimes you can kind of see that sort of reticence of being noticed in some of the styling. This is like a raffia mask, and on the right is my first drawing. When I'm working on a collection, each one is completely different. So this collection started with this particular drawing, and then the whole collection came from this one sketch. Sometimes, so for example, with the calico collection that's Smock, that was really just about making a difference from what I'd done before. So they all come from different places, so each one's kind of a unique body of, a unique process of making. Sometimes they come from an image, sometimes they come from a dream, sometimes they come from a sketch like this. So yeah, it's always different. I wish it was just a bit more straightforward, the same process every time, but it isn't. This is a still from the film we did. This is, again, making the textile. So the textile for this was just loads of plaits in silk, which you can kind of see, and I've brought with me and wearing them, that we stitched together with elastic. This is, again, another installation. This was obviously a bit more fashion shop fashion kind of display, traditional. This was in New York as well. And yeah, we just made a big cliff in the shop, which was really fun. And yeah, it was about a kind of a comment on weightlessness and weight. So the rocks were this sort of big heavy weight, and then the rails I designed were trapeze inspired, so it was a kind of, yeah, suspension and weightiness combined. This collection is, yeah, this is one of my favourite ones. This was in a really nice show space. The British Fashion Council had kind of started to notice I existed by this point, and let me into the big space in Somerset House. So this was a beautiful basement room, which was a round room that you had to sort of go down lots of stairs to get into, and it was kind of relatively small. So I wanted to make this sort of magic spherical space that you could come into and just come into a completely transformative experience, and I just wanted it to be a very kind of magical, and the method of the presentation was quite ritualistic. There was no seating. I never have any seating in the shows. Once again, it's about kind of distancing the way I present work compared to how it's traditionally done, where you all sit down in the front row and you have the celebrities on the front row and stuff, and it was really kind of a reaction against that. I don't want to have shows that are like that. So you had to all kind of squish into this room and sort of stand against the wall, and then the girls came really close to you, so it was quite an invasive kind of performative element that it had. The collection was really big and it had a lot of different surfaces in it. This set of stairs actually is from one of my mother's performances that they very kindly lent to me, which we transformed into this sort of glistening glass spherical magic display in the middle of the room, and that my dad made for her. So it was kind of a family affair, this one. So you can see them there. We also worked with a filmmaker who made this very weird film out of like goo, which didn't really work that well. So I won't show it to you. So this textile is called Guipur, which is it's like a 16th century lace making technique, which would normally be tiny, 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 and made in strings of vellum. But yeah, once again, I expanded the size of it, and I made it in calico, and it was all shredded and stuff. You can see here. This is the making of production. It's a kind of close up. It's like these weird sort of bumblebee triangles that are made by stretching. We bought loads of golfing net. I really enjoy using materials that you don't necessarily always buy from a fabric supplier. You can see this is the research. This is from my favourite book, which is Mrs. Beeton's Sewing Book. It's a great book. I recommend it to everyone. It just looks really kind of fusty and old-fashioned on the outside, but it has these amazing techniques that you just don't see in any other textile books anywhere else. So I refer to that book a lot. Yeah, it's a really good historical manual of these lost textile techniques, which, yeah, I'm sure you would learn if you're on a specialist textile course, but I never learnt them at uni, so I have to research them myself. Stuff like that wasn't really being done in London when I graduated. It was, when I graduated, I was coming into this environment of sort of mass production of digital print. Mary Katransu was really big, Christopher Kane, Peter Pilotto. It was all these like bright, brash, digital printed. Everything was digital printed. So I think the actual generation that I graduated with and the generation that I studied with of people were really, their work was a natural reaction against those kind of things, and there was a lot of textiles amongst the other people that were kind of from my peer group and stuff, which is quite interesting. I think it was a natural swing away from that computer-made fashion into a handmade fashion. So like Faustine Steinmetz and even like we call them Martin Pater. Marcus and Melda did a lot of textiles back in the day as well. Yeah, there was definitely like a kind of a textiles moment going on with the kind of peer group that I graduated with. So these are some other pieces from that collection. This was a collaboration I did with my best friend, who's an amazing illustrator and printmaker. So I was really drawn to working with her because she's just so different from me. She wears bright colours, her hair's like rainbow colours, has makeup everywhere, and wears crazy clothes, and she just has like a really big, amazing personality. So yeah, I thought I do a lot of collaborations when I make my collections, and it was an excuse to kind of work with someone that was so different from me and kind of get the essence of Helen. So yeah, I just really loved the immediacy of her mark making. So it was about capturing these beautiful immediate paint splashes. We called this smush, but yeah, it's like a really, really thick binder that's painted on by hand. So the pieces we sent to the shop, like each one was completely individual. And this is some other prints she did for me. So this was sort of directly painting onto my clothes, and she has an amazing eye for colour. So it was about kind of celebrating all the things that she notices in colour that I just can't see myself because I don't have the mind for colour. So yeah, it was kind of seeing my work through someone else's mind, which was really interesting. And I think that's the main benefit of collaborations, is that you get to see how someone else's mind works, and what's important to them might be something that you've never even thought of before. So it's quite an exciting process to work with someone else. This is just an example of how much I love to analyse the composition of each look, sort of from every angle. So yeah, I always really hated that when you just have the detail on the front and then the back of the dress is completely plain. It's nice if the composition works, all the way around. So even if you can't see it, someone else might be seeing something on the side of you or on the back of you. Yeah, and I think that's the luxury of making your own work, is you can put detail wherever you like. Maybe sometimes when you're working for other people, you have to kind of keep in mind budgetary requirements and stuff like that. This is the show of that collection. This is really loud, this music, so I'm going to turn it down. It's like a bit intense. I think a lot of people have like panic attacks. It's quite long, so I'm just going to show you So yeah, this is an installation we made from that collection, which was quite amazing actually. We got to share the room with, this was the same window that I did the first one for, but Louis Vuitton had it for half the month and then I had it for the other half the month, so that was a really great time. It's a huge, 6 meter long ship that we made and then covered in the net from that collection. So yeah, again, just making a piece to support the collection but not actually literally putting clothes on a mannequin in there. This collection was again kind of playing around with magic again. All of the pieces were net and they had these teaspoons of glitter which were trapped in all the hems, which is kind of a bit hard to see on these images because it's such a subtle detail. So yeah, some things you can really only appreciate when you see things close up. There's a skirt of it that's hanging down there. Kind of by then I moved into quite prop-based set design. So this is the set for this show, and this is the textiles that we used was basically enlarging embroidery. So using this really thin shrimp net as if it was oversized zoomed in fabric, and then using these ropes of velvet, these very thick ropes of velvet threaded in. So it was like an oversized embroidery and made these really heavy embroideries that kind of were very weighty and sculptural. I'm just going to show you the film of that as well because that has you can see the glitter, which is always nice to have a bit of glitter to look at. I've also used mirrors in the collection presentations as well. So this was about kind of showing all the different angles of the looks. And this is returning to woven elastic. So going back to the elastic and weaving it together to make this textile, which is hanging here as well if you wanted to look at it at the end. How are we doing on time? Fine, okay. This is an earring I'm wearing. So this earring was for the mirror collection and was a direct result of a very scathing review. So it was about kind of crossing the ear out. Yeah, fashion critics can be very harsh sometimes. But yeah, it's good. I think it's always good to use the things that happen to you, and whether they make you feel sad or if they make you feel happy, if they hurt your feelings. So always kind of use that energy and put it into your work. So this was about using my disappointment of that bad review to make a nice piece of work, which I'm quite happy with now, so it's good. But yeah, this was a collaboration with a jewelry designer that I did as well. This is a recent show, so this is the collection that's in the shops now. It's a really dark image. I don't know if you can see it that well. Can you see it okay? Which was based on a waiting room. So when you do a presentation, they're 2 hours long, so the poor models are just like hanging around for 2 hours. So yeah, it was about kind of playing on that idea, and usually they're expected just to stand there for hours, and most of them are really young. They're like, 17, 18, 19, they're kind of kids still, so I always feel really sorry for them having to even though they're being paid, it's like hanging around, and because they're young, they get bored. So yeah, this was a comment on that really, of kind of these long shows. So I made them a little waiting room, and the way that I designed it was that they came into the waiting room and they took a ticket from the ticket machine, which you'd normally get in like a meat counter or something. And then we had like an automated numbering system. So then their number would come up, and then they'd go over to this area where they'd have their photo taken. So it was basically we took it down to the fact that a fashion presentation is a glorified photo shoot. So I just made a photo shoot area, so we had like the really obvious photo background, and it kind of was self-perpetuating, and the girls just kind of went around in this kind of continuous cycle. So this is them all in their waiting room. So yeah, this is the flag shirt and the flag shorts. Back to latex. So yeah, the latex has kind of obviously developed away from being a textile. The latex came from the first collection I did, which was using rubber. So the latex was kind of trying to get that same material, that same idea of kind of shiny surfaces. This is a woven string. So it's basically like a blanket that we wove and draped across the body. And this is a silk. I brought this one with me. This is a woven silk. So we cut loads of white silk and loads of black silk into tiny, thin 1 centimetre strips. And then we pinned the shrimp net out onto an embroidery frame and then wove this irregular weaving pattern into it. So it's basically sort of double layers of silk with the net in between. You can come and touch it if you want to later. This is like some of the research for the collection. So that kind of white noise, TV static idea. I wanted to kind of like blank out the body, and the textile was related to this kind of white noise. I work with a really amazing makeup artist called Inga, who was Marjola's first makeup artist. So she's like late 40s, and sort of all of Marjola's early shows it's all her amazing makeup. So I'm really privileged and lucky to be able to work with her. So I thought I'd just put in a close-up shot of some of the things that she does for us. So she's quite hands-on, and kind of she kind of bustles into the studio and picks things up and like takes some back and kind of explores them. So this was actually a really beautiful crochet sample I'd made in a stitch called Peacock Stitch. It was very, very pretty, and she just painted the whole thing and then kind of did like a potato print across the girls' faces. So yeah, it's really nice to work in the way I do, because I get to work with like amazing musicians. So for example, the musician that did the music for the last video I showed you makes everything from found objects and a lot of children's toys, and yeah, I work with a lot of people that don't work in a kind of traditional way within their field. So for example, Inga and Hugh are a musician that we work with. So this is my most recent show, so I'm going to kind of wrap up now. Unless it's too early to wrap up. It's fine. So obviously been doing it for a few years now. So yeah, I wanted to completely reject the way that I had worked in the past with how I develop a collection. So usually when I develop a collection, I do my research boards and then kind of pull things out and develop each thing, and then then you work them into like this one body of work, so that works across the whole collection. But for this collection, I wanted to work in a completely different way. I think it's nice to kind of continuously be changing your own landscape, so you can challenge yourself and see what would happen if you were working in a different way. So I basically designed 7 characters. So instead of doing like a whole inspiration for a whole collection, there was basically 7 separate researches for each character. And this is a bit of writing that I wrote to kind of explain each character. So each character was a metaphor or a kind of allegory of something that had happened or an event that happened. It was quite post-Brexit inspired, the show. It was kind of a very visceral time, and yeah, like a lot of things were happening to a lot of people I knew, and yeah, it was really kind of started out as being a protest collection and actually turned out to be more of a record of the week after Brexit. So each character and each action they're doing is a record of a different event that happened on a different day after that announcement was made, to people that I know or things like that. So these are some of the characters. This is the mourner at the end, the water bearer in the middle, and the smuggler on the left. So yeah, each one is kind of a different character, and they had a different action to do. So you can see it's kind of was quite different from how I normally present my work, where it's like a whole collection together. It's like these individual worlds that I made with different actions and different set design for each one. This is the mourner. And then this is the set. So the layout for the presentation was inspired by that amazing sculpture gallery, bust gallery in the V&A, where you have those long, long lines of sculptures all next to each other. So we made a different plinth for each character. So when you came in, they were just sort of this amazing long line of different characters doing different things. So yeah, this is the smugglers' aeroplanes, which were they were metaphors for lies, these aeroplanes. That's my most recent collection, and then this is just a quick example of another project I did for a gallery up in Manchester, which was this corset outfit, which I made for a filmmaker, which was quite fun to do. So it's nice to be able to kind of collaborate with other people on their own projects as well. And then the last 2 slides I'm going to show you, one slide I'm going to show you is the most recent installation I did, which is going back once again to the smocking technique, which is really popular whenever I do anything. People want me to do it with this textiles, have to go back and do it again. So this is a smocked calico globe that I made for an exhibition in Soho. Yeah. That's pretty much everything, really.
Are there any questions for Phoebe at all? Anybody would like to ask anything or come down and have a look at a beautiful garment? It would be a shame for her to come all this way and not to look at these garments. Please do.
There's also some posters of my work, which I have loads of in the studio, so I brought them up if anyone wanted to take them home with you or keep them or use them as cat litter tray filler. Yeah, help yourself.